Good morning, Mark Kranenburg, Airports Director. You'll find the airport's budget on page C3 in your budget book. I want to remind you of the mission of the Airports Department is to provide for the management, the operations and maintenance and development of the city's municipal airports to our tenants, users, and the general public so that they can have a safe and efficient transportation system. Before I get started with the budget presentation this morning, I do have a short video I'd like to show you of a typical day at Will Rogers World Airport and also highlight some of the activity over this past year. Very good. I want to credit Josh Ryan on my staff who put that video together in-house. He used a still camera and some desktop applications and completely edited it, and he did an absolute fantastic job. Before I get into the departmental issues and our performance indicators, I do want to give you a brief overview of the Airport Trust budget. Looking at our total airport charges to our tenants and users of $61,547,000, these are the major categories of those funds received. Building rents is comprised of rentals for the terminal building as well as other buildings and hangars that the Airport Trust owns. We have landing fees, which is charged to our passengers and freight carriers, and this is at a calculated rate per 1,000 pounds of landed weight. We also have parking revenues derived from our public parking operation, and this is, we have 7,200 plus parking spaces in our garages and our surface lots. Concession revenues are derived from our food and beverage and retail and rental car commission revenues. And then we have fuel sales, which is a price per gallon that we charge for any fuel that is either retailed on the airport or through those leases that have self-fueling privileges. We have the customer facility charges, which is related to the user fee that pays for the debt service for the rental car center, also pays for the operations and maintenance of the building and the buses. And then a lot of other airport charges that are maintenance reimbursement, apron fees, and ground rentals, which are associated with lease components and leases. We also have other revenue sources as well. Looking at $18,106,000. We have some oil and gas revenues that still we receive periodically. We use this for our matching grants, for our federal grants. We have interest that we receive from a money market account. Passenger facility charges, which is the user fee that supports our capital program. And then each year we get a variety of federal and state participation, primarily from the Federal Aviation Administration and the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission, for eligible projects for equipment for our maintaining our airfield. We also are anticipating $30,182,000 of carryover. This is mainly funds from our project fund and also includes the Mike Monroney Aeronautical escrow account, and then $22,224,000 in revenue bond proceeds and these are intended to be used on construction this next year. So total sources of funds, $132,059,000. And I want to point out also that the Airport Trust does not receive any general fund support. The Airport Trust is an enterprise fund and is self-sufficient on its own rates, fees, and charges. When you look at the uses of the funds, we have operating expenditures, $13,796,000. This is where our major contracts come from, with our parking management contract, our janitorial, aircraft rescue and firefighting contract, and our security contract. We have also commodities, which is various services and supplies, debt service requirements. This is from prior financing of projects such as the last terminal expansion that was completed in 2006, and most recent parking garage that was constructed in the rental car center. And then we have the department operating account of $18,885,000 for a total operating expenditures $45,435,000. We are anticipating reserves of $2,810,000. These are funds estimated to receive in 2019 to be used on future capital, and a significant capital outlay this next year planned at $83,814,000 that balances the budget. I want to bring your attention to a few of the projects that we've completed that highlight our strategy to improve infrastructure and the environment for the traveling public. We completed recently the parking revenue and control system. This is a new system that replaced the outdated and old system that we had. We replaced all of the infrastructure. This is all network-based, connected to our facilities, parking garages, and surface lots. And it also pays for certain amenities such as pay-on-foot kiosks, space-by-space counts in Garage B, and it also renovated the toll plaza. We also completed an apron project. The apron is quite large. We had one section we needed to repair. This is at the intersection of Taxiway K. And we also completed the Taxiway G extension. Taxiway G is a taxiway that is the longest east-west taxiway that is at Will Rogers World Airport. And if you look on the map, you can see that we extended this 1,500 feet. This is significant because it now extends into Lariat Landing, and that makes about 160 acres available for aeronautical development that we did not have before. We also completed some Wiley Post projects. One of them is the Airfield Improvements Phase 3 project. This is, we did some renovations to a couple of major taxiways on Taxiway Alpha. We did some pavement reconstruction, repaired some airfield lights and signs, and also did lights and signage on Taxiway B. And then Mike Monroney Aeronautical Center is a major line of business for us, and we completed over $14,700,000 in projects. As the landlord for Mike Monroney for the Airport Trust-owned buildings, which there are over 30, we maintain the exterior structure, roofs, pavements, mechanical systems inside many of these buildings, as well as various other infrastructure. So now I'd like to discuss our department issues and some of our performance indicators. Our first issue relates to factors that impact resources for funding, operations, and capital. The nature of the airline industry can be very volatile, and its activity can be fluctuating, and the number of operations and passengers at the airport can affect various revenue categories such as our parking, concessions, and even our passenger facility charges. So our strategy is to increase and stabilize airport revenue. One of the measures for this is the tracking of our food, beverage, and retail revenue to maintain a growth of at least 2% a year. And you can see in the last few years we've had quite a few fluctuations. In fiscal year 13 and 14, actually that was the last time we had a calendar year record of passenger boarding enplanements at 1.9 million. In FY 14 and 15, you can see that we were below our 2% target, and this is because the lounge that was in the security area was closed, and then you can see it rebounded the very next year with the opening of Cross Grains Brewery, which has been a very big success. In the last 2 years, we've met our target flat at 2%. Another strategic measure is to maintain our parking revenue per transaction growth at 2% a year. This, again, you see fluctuations over the past year. In FY 13 and 15, we had a little bit of an increase over our 2% target, and this was mainly because we kept a lot of the displaced parkers that had been hurt by the off-airport location of the airport that had some heavy damage from the tornado that was the preceding year. In FY14 and 15, we had a lot of maintenance in our garage, so we went down a little bit. In FY15 and 16, our employments were basically flat. And then in FY16, 17, you see our rate increase, and that's the reason for that big jump. And this last year, we were basically flat. Our second issue relates to factors that we have to react to effectively. And if we don't, they could impact airport staffing, workload, funding requirements, and long-term planning. So there can be fluctuations other than the airline industry and the aviation industry. General aviation also gets hit quite hard sometimes with that. So goes the economy, so goes general aviation. And we can also be subjected to safety, security, and environmental requirements, which often result in unfunded mandates that the airport has to address. So our strategy is to improve the airport environment for our travelers and tenants through long-term planning and infrastructure improvements, and we'll talk about a couple of those projects in a minute. I want to talk about a couple of lines of business, or in the commercial line of business, a couple of measures that we have. One is the percentage of certification work orders that we complete within 3 business days of identifying a deficiency. So what's a certification work order? Every year, the Federal Aviation Administration inspects commercial service airports such as Will Rogers. And there are dozens and dozens of areas that we get inspected on. This is primarily for the airfield. And we have to pass that inspection in order for airlines to continue to fly into Will Rogers. So we typically always do very, very good, and we did great this last year. We also track the percentage of days with 0 security incidents. There are over 3,300 people that we badge at the airport so they can do their job at Will Rogers World Airport. In the general aviation line of business, I want to mention the percentage of itinerant takeoffs and landings from Wiley Post Airport. With an actual of 70% and a target of 74%, I'm really struck. I've managed a lot of general aviation airports in my career, and to have this much itinerant traffic, itinerant meaning a landing and takeoff from an aircraft that is not based at the airport, that means a lot of commerce is happening in the city, in my opinion, and this has been historically high at Wiley Post Airport. We also track the percentage of days that the airport has a runway closed. This is a barometer for us because we have a lot of construction on our runways from time to time. Wiley Post has had a complete overhaul of the airfield over the last few years and has had both its parallel runways closed for a significant amount of time. Our third issue, and one I want to spend a little bit of time on this morning, deals with air service. We've done a really good job attracting air service, and we've done an equally good job of sustaining that air service. Air service can affect the economic development of the city and the region, tourism, and the convention business. And we know that Oklahoma City's population and business activity is just going to result in an increased request and demand for air service. And we want to continue to attract as good an air service as we can. So when we look at our in-plane passengers, we try to meet a target of 2% a year. That's pretty assertive. When you look at our comprehensive annual financial report over each year, we go back 10 years and our historical growth is 1.6%. And you can see over the last few years, it's been fairly stable. This year for FY18, ending June 30, we're anticipating to be just below 2 million boarding passengers, and for next year we're anticipating to be above 2 million. Another measure that we use is to keep track of our cost per in-plane passenger to no more than 5% a year. This is a huge measure and comes up every year in our discussions with our airlines. We're regarded and have been historically as a low-cost airport for the airlines to operate out of. When you look at a small hub median airport like Oklahoma City, you can see that the typical cost per in-plane passenger is now well above $8, and our last one is $6.44. We determine this periodically each year by evaluating that rate through our rates and charges. I mentioned about 3 weeks ago during the robust economy presentation that people are surprised about our route map, and we have a very good service, and especially to the east and west coast for the last few years. And now we have 29 nonstop destinations, which is as many as we've ever had. We've had a lot of recent accomplishments this last year. Frontier Airlines came back into the market, serving Denver and Orlando, which was a new city for them. American Airlines, April the 3rd, started to Phoenix to compete with Southwest Airlines, so our citizens have more choices. Frontier also started nonstop to San Diego, April the 9th. Austin, flying a smaller aircraft by Via Airlines 4 times a week. And then next week, American Airlines is starting service to Philadelphia. Again, I mentioned a few weeks ago, this is huge for us because it opens up dozens of connecting opportunities out of Oklahoma City. And there will be 2 flights in the morning on American, so that works really well for their transatlantic departures in the afternoon. Frontier also recently announced they'll be serving San Antonio nonstop. Southwest will be doing weekly service starting in October to Nashville. So on new airlines, I mentioned Frontier and Via coming into the market. And new enhancements, we also track those as well. So Allegiant is expanding summer service to Destin, Florida to 5 times a week. I mentioned also a couple of weeks ago that American Airlines will be upgauging their aircraft. In other words, adding more seats, so we'll have several hundred more seats available this summer than we did last summer. There are several ways that there can be an upgauge or an enhancement to our service other than a new destination or a new carrier, but a carrier can decide to add more flights per day to a destination, or as I said, they can add more seats. We do have ongoing efforts that we have been marketing very heavily. The Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport is a priority for us, as well as New York LaGuardia, and the Miami South Florida area is important for us. And this list, our target list used to be bigger than this. Philadelphia was on it at some time, so it is shrinking, so that's good. And then 2 new airlines that we are in regular conversations with is Spirit and JetBlue. There are reminder issues that can impact air service, the economy, the recession that we had in the mid-2000s certainly constrained capacity and networks across the country. Operational strategies of airlines, such as mergers, can also affect air service. The fuel price crisis that we also had in the 2000s, that significantly impacted carriers that were flying 50-seat regional jets. It made them uneconomical to fly, and so many of those routes were canceled. And then finally, Real ID, just to remind you that Oklahoma still technically is a non-compliant state with the Department of Homeland Security, and we are currently under an extension that only runs to October the 10th. Our final issue is the amount of land that we have for development, increasing maintenance demands on vacant facilities, and the growing cost of the 8,100 acres at Will Rogers and also the 1,300 acres at Wiley Post and 1,000 acres at Page Airport. We have existing infrastructure that we have to maintain. We want to continue our land development plan and find ways to improve that infrastructure. Not doing so could prevent the airport trust from receiving a self-sustaining revenue source for the long term, and also it can prevent the city from the creation of more jobs and increasing the sales tax base. In the construction program, in the property management line of business, one of the measures that we've done really good at the last few years is tracking our project costs with contracts for construction and engineering amendment costs. So we try to not have any more than a 5% increase in those a year, and you can see the last few years we've done really well in that area. In the maintenance line of business, a couple of measures, percentage of operating hours where mechanical systems are functioning. We're doing well, we're meeting our target. Just to let you know, these are creature comforts for our tenants and for the passengers, and they affect things such as passenger boarding bridges and our baggage system, which if it goes out, we certainly hear from everybody about that, and also our mechanical systems, heat and air. We also track the percentage of vehicles and equipment available for use. The airport has over 400 pieces of equipment, everything from a weed eater to a road grader, and some of these are very, very critical, such as our parking shuttles for our parking operation. We have ice and snow equipment that we need to maintain. They have to be ready when we need them. And also we maintain the airport's aircraft rescue and firefighting equipment and vehicles. I want to show a few projects that show our continued infrastructure improvements. In the last half of this next fiscal year coming up, we will be doing a garage wayfinding project. This is where we will be adding new signage to both of the 5-story garages, And at each entrance to the garage, we're going to have a component that will provide real-time updates as to the spaces that are available per level. The airport's terminal upper deck outside the ticketing counter, it is a bridge deck, and it needs to be looked at and repaired and maintained from time to time, and this is the first phase of the upper level structural repair. We'll be replacing some of those structural connections that are not part of the expansion joints. We'll be repairing some delaminated areas, installing and applying some polymer coating to improve the wearing surface, and also some protective coating on some of the structural members. So Garage A waterproofing, a year or so ago I came to you and told you about our premium parking product, and we were underway with an engineering effort to do a joint sealing project on Garage A. This is the two-story where we have the upper level short-term parking. And I just wanted to show this is what we've been dealing with and struggling with this last year. So what we ended up having to do instead of a joint sealing project was a much more extensive project to prevent the water from protruding through actually the expansion joints and the control joints. So it ended up being a bigger fix than what we anticipated. I will tell you that project is out to bid, and bids come in on that project tomorrow. We're hoping that it will be 4 or 5 months. By the end of this year, we hope it will be open. Also, the terminal expansion, we have finished the design and we're out for our final construction estimate at this point. To remind you the goals of the terminal expansion, this is the beginning of an east concourse. We'll be constructing 4 gates, 3 that will be leased to the airlines and 1 airport operated gate. We'll be also adding concessions, increased public circulation. We'll be adding an 8-lane security checkpoint, which will replace the 2 checkpoints we have today. Those will be turned into larger meter greeter lobbies. We're almost finished with the maintenance facility that is being built at Wiley Post Airport. This will be new offices and maintenance bays for that group. We also have a project at Wiley Post, a small one, but nevertheless significant, $500,000 to continue and almost finish up our airfield improvements at Wiley Post with taxiway A5 and taxiway A8. We're also doing a master plan at Wiley Post Airport. This is an FAA requirement. There are several elements to a master plan, and it is absolutely critical to ensure that you still can get funding through the FAA for the future. And then at Mike Monroney, again, huge line of business for us. You can just see a variety of improvements over this next year that we're planning to do. In summary, looking at the department operating account, $18,885,000, and this is broken out by the line of business. We do have some budget changes for this next year. We're projecting an increase in insurance, benefits, and salaries, $462,000, a slight increase in city-provided services. We're adding a civil engineer too to meet up with the demand. This was actually at the request of Mike Monroney because of all the HVAC and mechanical system projects that are in the variety of buildings that we're doing now and is planned for the next few years. We're adding a revenue auditor. The airport receives about $80 million a year in revenue from our 400 to 500 plus leases. 50% of all of these leases have self-reporting requirements with revenue and other compliance reporting that they report to the airport staff, and the revenue auditor will help us oversee the compliance with all of that. This position will also help save $45,000 from using a separate consultant each year that really just identifies a couple of specialty areas. And then finally, with regard to the revenue auditor, the Government Accounting Standards Board recently made a huge decision that affects airports. All of our leases now have to be booked as receivables, which means it's a tremendous amount of time and paperwork when you have to book a receivable for the length of time our leases are. Some of them 5 years, some 20, some as long as 40. So it's going to be a very monumental staff intaking by the staff. We're also adding a system support specialist 2 position. This is related to the parking and revenue control system that we are bringing in-house. It's all network connected. Now that that's on board, also the 500 plus CCTV cameras that we have at the airport, our contractor that was doing the installation and maintenance on that is expiring. We're bringing all of that in-house as well. a unit operations supervisor for Wiley Post Airport. This is for the maintenance section. We've not had one up there. It's badly needed, and this is simply a position that does the same thing that the maintenance sections and similar components do at Will Rogers World Airport. And then finally, at Will Rogers, we're asking for the horticulture worker 2 and 2 grounds maintenance operators. In the last 2 years in our Leading for Results program, we're only showing that we're meeting 50% of all the landscaping, irrigation, and mowing that we need to do. We've had 2 huge areas of impact to us in that department. The 40-acre rental car center has constant maintenance day to day, and probably someday we'll probably need more people for that as well. We want that to continue to look good to the public. And then Portland Avenue, which was opened up a year or so ago, now we're maintaining all of that landscaping, mowing, the irrigation, all the way from 54th Street south to 104th Street. And there will be other common areas of maintenance that we'll need to do in Lariat Landing so that we continue to attract development and maintain that area for the public.
I guess that's the one question I had in looking at major budget changes, number 6. It said that these positions were to address significant increases in the numbers of acres of land maintained. And so you're talking about the Portland area and then the rental car facility?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's all I have for you this morning. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.